Daniel Sports Center, we go over our 2022 college football predictions for the Miami Hurricanes, team that went 7-5 overall in the 2021 season. Not a bad season for Miami, but how this team be in 2022, that's what we'll be going over here today. We'll be analyzing this team, predicting their schedule game by game in this video, starting out with your team trends. Miami 7-5 last season. They were 2-4 in their first 6 games, 5-1 in their last 6. So, I mean, this team starting out the season 2-4. It's not a record that you want to start the season with. I mean, it was a tough first half of the season, but they managed to turn things around and finish out the season 5-1. Got a couple of really good wins as well in those last 6 games. But I mean, this team had a brutal start to the season. If you think about it, Miami had to play Alabama. I mean, that's probably the one team that you don't really want to play in week 1 is Alabama. And the Hurricanes played them, lost that game 13-44. And I mean, Alabama last season, I actually was slightly optimistic. I figured Alabama would beat Miami by at least a couple of touchdowns, but I mean, the Hurricanes going into 2021, this team was an ACC dark horse. I mean, with D'Eriq King coming back, he had a great 2020 season, and I mean, things were looking up for the Hurricanes, but didn't really turn out to be that way. And this team ended up going 7-5. Still not a bad season, but I mean, this team was potentially in the conversation for an ACC title going into last season, but nonetheless. It was a tough start to the season. Lost Alabama there. They beat App State by 2. Even App State isn't terrible. And then they played Michigan State on September 18th. Lost that game 38-17. Turns out Michigan State was a really good football team last season. They went to a New Year's Six. They won a New Year's Six bowl game last year. And otherwise, you lost to North Carolina by 3. You beat NC State by 1. That was a good win. They also beat Pitt on the road 38-34. So you had 2 really good wins in back-to-back weeks there. You beat Virginia Tech 38-26 and beat Duke as well on the road to finish out your season 47-10. This team did qualify for a bowl game, but unfortunately they couldn't participate in it. Looking at the roster going into next season, this team does return the starting quarterback. Tyler Van Dyke is returning for next season. Definitely showed potential when he played last season. 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, 6 picks, 62% completion rate as well. I mean, his stats weren't bad last season, and D'Eriq King, he was expected to be the full-time starter, but turns out he just kept dealing with injuries, and unfortunately he couldn't play too much. And even when he did play last season, I mean, he didn't look terribly great. And I mean, Tyler Van Dyke, it was good to get him ready, and I definitely think Tyler Van Dyke is a quarterback to keep an eye on in the ACC going into next season. So you return him, you lose D'Eriq King, but you do return your top receivers or your top running back as well there in Jalen Knighton. Last season, he put up over 800 yards and 11 touchdowns. He is a player to keep an eye on. He's definitely going to be a key player in the backfield next season. You lose Cameron Harris, your second running back from last season. You also lose your top 2 receivers, Charleston Rambo and then Mike Harley. So Charleston Rambo, of course, last season had a huge impact on this team, putting up over 1,100 yards of receiving and 7 touchdowns. And, of course, you can't forget about Mike Harley either, who put up 500 yards and 5 touchdowns last season. So, I mean, this team does lose the top 2. You got some good depth in the receiving position, but certainly it's gonna be a challenge losing your top 2 receivers and replacing them. But you got Xavier Restrepo coming back from last season, who put up just over 300 yards of offense and 2 touchdowns. So he's definitely going to be one of the key receivers going into next season. And I mean, once again, there's some good depth here, but you're losing your top 2, so that does concern me just a bit there. But you do return Will Mallory, who was 4th in receiving for this team last season, putting up nearly 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. Miami does lose 2 on the offensive line, 3 defensive linemen, linebacker Carter, and then safety in the backfield Bolden. So defensively, you do lose 5 starters, but that's not terribly concerning. Defensive line, you do lose 3 there, but otherwise linebacking situation and the secondary looks pretty good. So, I mean, the Hurricanes, this is a team that is in a division that is, I would say, the most wide open division in the Power 5, and that is the ACC Coastal Division. You got 5 different teams that could win that division next season. I mean, you got Miami, you got Virginia Tech, you got North Carolina, you got Pitt, you got Virginia. Keep an eye on Virginia as well. I mean, that division is wide open going into next season. So, I mean, honestly, for that division, I could see 5 teams getting 8 wins in that division next season. It's just a matter of who gets to 10 wins or even 9 wins will win that division for next season. So, I don't think Miami's a national contender, but this team very well could win an ACC title next season. I can see that happening if they can manage to pull out the division. Transfer portal and recruiting going into next season, you do lose a few key players to the transfer portal, but at the same time, you do add some depth. You lose Nesta Jade Silvera to Arizona State, and of course, you do lose linebacker Bradley Jennings and safety Gervin Hall, both off to different places. So that does concern me, losing those three players. All three of them had impacts on the defense last season. But you do bring in Moultrie, edge rusher from UAB. You also got Aguad coming in, defensive lineman from UCLA. Daryl Porter, defensive back from West Virginia. Henry Parrish and Frank Ladson. You got a couple of offensive players coming in as well. And recruiting-wise, you're 16th in the nation, 3rd in the ACC. You got 10 4-stars and 4 3-stars coming in. So the recruiting's really good for next season. That is definitely something that is a positive for this team. You also bring in a defensive lineman from West Virginia, Denise, an offensive lineman from Oregon, Daryl Jackson, defensive back coming in from Maryland. You also bring in Caleb Johnson, linebacker from UCLA. You lose Cody Brown, running back, and also Austin Cave, linebacker, off to West Virginia. So once again, the transfer portal has been very active for the Hurricanes so far this offseason. But that said, let's look at your schedule now going into next season. You start off the season against Bethune-Cookman, and that is going to be a home game. So, I mean, your first 2 games should be both easy wins. You got them at home, and you also got Southern Miss in week 2, which not too concerned about that one. But you got Texas A&M then. You have to go on the road to College Station to play Texas A&M, potentially one of the best teams in the SEC for next season. I could see Texas A&M being a national contender as well. I mean, yeah, so the Aggies are going to be good next season. That is going to be a very challenging game there. If you can pull that win off, go to College Station and win that game, that would be massive, to say the least. Then you got Middle Tennessee State coming to town the 24th, North Carolina, then to start off your ACC schedule. You got Virginia Tech on the road, Duke at home, Virginia on the road, Florida State at home. Then you got Georgia Tech, Clemson, both on the road, and Pitt to finish out the season. So somewhat of a challenging schedule. I mean, you got Clemson, of course, as one of your crossover games into the Atlantic Division. But you don't have to play NC State or Wake Forest, the 2 other teams that I do think are going to be at the top of that division. But you do have to play Texas A&M on the road. Looking at September, Bethune-Cookman, Southern Miss, both easy wins. Texas A&M, I'm going to favor the Aggies there. I'm pretty comfortable saying that. I just don't think Miami's going to go into College Station and pull out a win there. That's going to be a very challenging game. I could see Texas A&M winning that game by a couple of touchdowns. Just a tough environment, and they're going to be good next season. But once again, if you can win that game, I mean, that would be massive. Middle Tennessee State, that's going to be an easy win there as well. So 3-1 heading into October. Not a bad record to start off the season. North Carolina, close one, but I do want to favor the Hurricanes there. You got them at home, and North Carolina I don't think is going to be, I mean, they'll be a contender in the Coastal Division, but I don't expect them to be terribly good. Virginia Tech on the road, I'm going to favor the Hokies there, with that being a road matchup, plus Virginia Tech should be a decent team. Duke at home, easy win. Virginia on the road. Now, Virginia, that's a team that I really haven't talked about too much this offseason, but I do like the Cavaliers going into next season. They potentially could very well be my favorite to win the Coastal Division. Sounds crazy right now, but if you look at their returning production, they've got the best returning production out of anybody in the Coastal Division going to next season. Miami may have the best quarterback. I do think Tyler Van Dyke, I like him a lot, but I just think, I mean, Virginia and their depth and the players that got returned, their experience, they look pretty good. So I am going to favor the Cavs going into next season there on October 29th. So you're 5-3 heading into November. Not a bad situation at all. Florida State, close one, but a win. Georgia Tech, easy win on the road. Clemson, going to favor the Tigers there. I've got Clemson as my ACC favorite. So no surprises there. Clemson next season, just based off of how much they improved over the course of the 2021 season, they should very much be in the college football playoff conversation next year. And then you got Pitt at home. I will favor the Hurricanes there to get a nice win to finish out the regular season. So 8-4 is the record for Miami. Once again, the Coastal Division, I could see all 5 teams going 8-4 next season. I'm not even kidding you. And for the Hurricanes, I'm going to go 5-3 in conference and 8-4 as their overall record. But Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Hurricanes, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.